Number 1. I was out doing some spelunking with some friends and family in some deep caves. For those of you who don't know, spelunking is just another word for cave exploring. As we were heading out, we found a slit about knee-high in the rock. Getting on your stomach, there was a tight squeeze you could get into, and it led to a small crawl space in the rock, with quartz growing on the ceiling. It made a beautiful crystal display. We went in one by one, and if you're at all claustrophobic, this place would have been your living nightmare. Most of the time while you crawled through, you could feel the ceiling on your back and the floor on your stomach every time you took a breath. We went deep inside, and it was just incredible, like a small world tucked away within solid rock. I had made it in as deep as I could go before the path wound to the left and became covered with sedimental stalagmites and stalactites. Everyone was having a grand time when we started feeling some trickles of water on our backs. Turns out it was raining outside, and with the way that the crawl space dipped down before flattening out, this whole place would fill up with rainwater pretty damn quickly. The only way for it to drain out was the way we had come in. It started as trickles before turning into streams. After a few moments, it was starting to pool up. I was the furthest away from the exit, and to get out, you could only crawl flat on your stomach, with jagged crystals pointing down from the ceiling. I started to panic. Everyone crawled out as fast as they could as the water kept flooding in, the streams growing larger and stronger. We left one at a time as fast as we could, but it wasn't fast enough. I could feel the water coming up to my chin as I crawled behind my brother. Each inch I took forward felt so painfully slow that I could feel the walls compress around me, and the water was unrelenting, now splashing against my panicked squirms. I got out just as the water was up to my lips. Thankfully, everyone made it out safely. I'm not eager to try that again. Number 2. Recently, and by recently I mean like 8 months ago, I moved to an island in the South Pacific and have gotten the hiking bug. So I try and get out to new locations as much as I possibly can, what with work eating into my precious time and all. This happened about 2 weeks ago. Since I live in the South Pacific region, it gets mighty hot, driving all but the most insane hikers indoors unless it's at night. Of course, I'm not a masochist, so I try to do all my hiking in the early hours of the morning, or in the evening when it starts getting cool. I've never been afraid of going hiking by myself. I did it when I lived in Oregon, and never ran into any problems. But then again, my island isn't my friendly home state. I always carry pepper spray, and when I used to go hiking in Montana and Wyoming, I would sometimes carry a handgun to ward off anything I couldn't handle by myself, whether that be a bear or a person. But I had always gotten off considerably lucky. I got to the trailhead at about 6:30 in the evening. The trail was called 1,000 Steps, but in all honesty, it was mostly just a walk straight down to the cliff, and then a grueling journey back up. I didn't want to go, but my dog, Mad Moxie, needed to be walked, and I had done the hike so many times I could have probably done it in my sleep. The first thing I noticed when I pulled up was an old, rickety, rusted-out blue pickup truck with a big plastic tarp over the bed to keep the rain out. These are pretty common on the island, affectionately earning them the name Guam Bombs. I didn't think much of it as I hooked up Moxie and started heading down to the trail, trying my best to ignore the mosquitoes that were making a meal out of my exposed neck. Heading down to the trail was relatively easy. Avoiding the banana spiderwebs, I felt the stress of my day slowly unwind as the underbrush grew darker and night approached. I made it all the way down to the water's edge when I noticed a man standing about 100 yards away. It was dark enough now that I could only see his silhouette, so I have no idea whether he was looking at me or at the water, but I chose to ignore him and instead pull Moxie's ball from my backpack and throw it for her a few times to get all her wiggles out. After some time, the man started walking over to me and stopped maybe about 10 feet away. Now, I'm not a tiny waif of a woman. I'm 23 years old, and I stand at about 5'6". This guy was just a couple of inches taller than me, but something about him just felt weird. "Evening," I greeted him, as he nodded and looked down at Moxie, who had just returned from running after her ball. I stooped down to pet her now sweaty head, as the man kept his eyes trained on my dog. "Can I help you, sir?" "Pretty dog," he responded mildly. "You alone?" "I have my dog," I said lamely, trying to sound braver than I was feeling. "I'm never alone." I tried to emphasize on the fact that I had my dog with me, but the man seemed unfazed by my statement. "Oh, have a good night." With that, he turned around and started walking back towards the trailhead. I watched his shadow disappear into the trees and waited for about half an hour before I too started walking back towards the path, my mind on high alert as Moxie pulled me through the trees and up the cliffside. The crickets pierced the night as I climbed the steps, illuminated by my flashlight. My hands were full with Moxie's leash and my light, but you could bet your buns I'd have my pepper spray out if I had an extra hand. Finally, my light pierced the trees at the top, and I practically booked it up the hill. When I got to the top, I nearly shat myself. The rusted blue pickup truck was sitting in the parking lot still, but their passenger side door was practically touching my car's driver's side. Inside the car, I could faintly see two men sitting in the cab, and I could feel them watching me. Slowly, I approached my car, walking as far over to the passenger side as I could, and kept Moxie with me as close as possible. I opened the door and crawled over to the driver's side. At that moment, the door of the pickup truck flew open, and my dog started going apeshit, barking at the two people who were now outside of their car and trying to break into mine. Heart in my chest, I rammed the keys into the ignition and tore out of the parking lot so quickly I nearly took my mirror off. I called my mum as soon as I got home, and she begged me to call the police. Unfortunately, the police here on the island aren't as vigilant as they are on the mainland, and that area is known for car thefts, muggings, and other debaucheries, as I learned from my co-workers later that week. One thing stands out though. Earlier this month, another girl actually disappeared from that area without a trace, and it makes me wonder if the men in the blue pickup truck didn't have something to do with it. If I hadn't had Moxie with me, could that have been me? If I learned anything from this experience, it's that for my lady hiker friends, please always take pepper spray with you, go hiking in groups, and always let someone know where you're going. It might just save your life someday. Story update. I did call the cops about the missing female and the truck I saw. They said they'd investigate into it. So far, I haven't heard anything, but I fear for this woman's life and realize how easily it could have been my own. Also, I realize that hiking alone, especially as a female, is a dangerous pastime, and I do realize again how foolish and naive I was being. But I have learned and plan to not hike alone anymore. Number 3. I worked for a bit as a deckhand on fishing boats out of San Diego. A few times we would come across deserted smaller boats, pangas, drifting with outlandishly big motors. Every time, the captain would just cut hard port or starboard to get away from them as quickly as possible. I knew they were drug-running boats that had probably dropped off their cargo, but I'd check them out with my binoculars if I was close enough. One had 2 people on it. Both had clearly been shot a bunch of times, and one was still moving and fairly alive. I told the captain, got a disapproving headshake, and we were on our way. Number 4. When I was 10, we went to visit family in Mexico. My cousin and I were walking down the street on our own to the store. We were on a sidewalk that was dangerously close to a 2-lane main road in this small town. 2 12 to 14-year-old kids sped past on a moped. They were in the wrong lane. When they swerved to miss an oncoming bus, they slammed into the back of a flatbed tow truck. The flatbed ramp thing on those is sharp as hell, and the impact was gruesome. The older of the kids, who was driving, was cut in half midway up his chest. He was cut right under his pectoral line, and his arms were cut in half way up his biceps. The top half sat perfectly upright on the bed of the truck, and his severed arms were still holding on to the handles. The kid who was riding behind him was torn open and bent back at a 90-degree angle, with his spine being the only thing keeping his top half from falling off. His arms were flailing around for a brief moment before he died. That whole image, along with every sound, are still incredibly vivid in my memory, even after 16 years. Hi guys, Lazy here, and thank you very much for listening. Well, so many of you seem to get freaked out by that caving story in my last Reddit post video, so I figured I'd include another one here. Make sure to check that video out if you haven't already, by the way. That is, if you're in the mood for something spooky. Because if you're in the mood for something lighter, then the last video I put out, the April Fool's Day video, is a good laugh, I think, so yeah, go and check that out. It's me narrating hate comments. Not all hate, some of them were just too funny not to include, so that's something a little different. Might be up your street, might be. Anyway, thank you all for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, be sure to smash that like button, or I'll smash you, and I'll be back again very, very soon. Until then, guys, you all stay spooky. And remember, the best things happen in the dark.